Welcome back to just another solar podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
Luke, I am alive and well.
Good to hear, mate. Industry legend Nigel Morris. How are you, Nigel?
Hey, mate. Hey, Karl. I'm glad you're well. I think everyone has just been smashed this week, right?
It's just been so busy, and the weather in Melbourne has been so spectacularly crap. It's tough to stay motivated. I'm guessing that no solar systems went in yesterday or today in Melbourne because the weather's been rubbish. The upside is that we had some rain.
I'd say this, that the last 6 months, chatting around the grounds and around the country to different solar companies, installers, retailers, there's been a lot of negativity and people have been talking about the numbers being down, and it's been a really tough market out there. But the last couple of weeks, it seems that there's a lot more activity. People have got their tails up, and there's some really good signs for us to finish the year strong.
Let's hope so. I'm hearing on the grapevine that there's mountains of batteries going in. So that's great for the industry because it's obviously high value work. And I hope everyone is making good margins out of doing battery work.
And now another plug. All Energy is coming up in a couple of weeks, which is a premier event for our industry down there in Melbourne. And day 2 on the Solar Masterclass Stage 1, you can come and see us record this live at 2:30. Now, the interesting thing about that is our friends at Clenergy are going to sponsor the drinks. And the whole premise of this podcast is the conversation that professionals would have at the pub. So Clenergy's coming to the party, so you can come and join us, grab a beer or wine, whatever you prefer. Watch us on the stage, have a drink, and I'd like to call it the podcast uncut because it's normally edited. You get to hear all of Karl's bits of wisdom that doesn't get cut, all of Nigel's thought bubbles. It's going to be interesting, boys.
Could be long.
No, it's going to be a good one. So make sure you get down there. We look forward to catching up with everyone.
I'll be cruising the whole place, mate. There's lots of events, a couple of speaking things. The boss has got a speaking thing. I've got meetings booked, events booked. It's going to be full.
I actually have sympathy for the people who organise the trade shows. Thankfully, in our company, I wasn't the one doing it, but I was privy to some of the organising and the level that goes into it just to get a stand there and to get everything done. So hats off to anyone in any organisation who's doing that, because that's a whole lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun being on the other side of the stand, Luke. We know that.
It's true. Now, there's been a couple of bits of news, Nigel, that we'll go into before we introduce our special guest. The first one about electronics.
Yeah. Now, this is one not a really well-known brand for those people who are newer to the industry, perhaps, but electronics inverters have been around forever. I should have done some research, but I didn't. It'd be probably 20 to 30 years. Along with Cellectronics, another Australian inverter manufacturer that were real pioneers in this stuff. And Klaus, who built that business up from scratch and sold a lot of inverters over the years, mostly in off-grid and a little bit of on-grid towards the end, they've announced they're finally closing down after decades and decades of manufacturing inverters, which is sad, but their time has come and Klaus's time has come to wind that business up. But I don't know if I've actually heard of this before. Anywhere in the world. What Klaus is doing is shutting his business down, and he's now on a quest to get those inverters back when they die, and he's converted his manufacturing plant into a recycling plant, and they are going to try and 100% recycle all the products they spent the last 20 to 30 years making, which is just remarkable. He's open sourcing some of the IP as well so that people can try to keep these things alive for as long as possible, but he'll recycle them when they're done, which is an amazing, amazing way to handle a legacy. So good on you, Klaus. Good on Electronic.
I've got one in the garage ready to go.
Oh, there you go. Fantastic.
On that note, I think we should introduce our special guest because there'll probably be some crossover with that recycling theme at some point. So our guest today is Zach Rook. He's the CEO of the Rainbow Power Company, which last episode, Nigel, you gave honour to Peter Pedals, one of the pioneers of the industry. And this, of course, was a business that he was a founder of. So now we've got the next generation coming through. Zach's got quite an interesting story because it's not the typical one we've seen, someone who's been in the solar industry and made good. He's found his way in elsewhere. So welcome, Zach, to the podcast.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me today. And yeah, interesting timing with a change in the guard. I reckon I'm the third generation or even maybe pushing the fourth to go through Rainbow Power. We're 37 years old now, and I giggle to myself because I'm 36, and since 1987 is all on all my cards and all of our new shirts and stuff, which is my birth year. So it's a cheekily thing, but it is. It's generations and generations, right, Nige?
That's it, mate. That's it. And the trip that I made up to Rainbow for Peter's Memorial sort of highlighted that, because all my old friends, well, some of them are pushing well into their 80s now. And, there are, but what struck me was that after almost 4 decades, there's just so many people who have gone through the place, and great that that next fourth generation, you are coming through, Zach. So for those who don't know, Rainbow Power Company, one of the very, very early companies in Australian solar, which is why we thought it would be, pertinent to get you guys up here. One of the original companies who ever did solar in Australia, but not many people know the story. So tell us a little bit about it, and, give us the short version of the history.
Yeah, so the short 37-year version is that Peter Pedals and a couple of his mates, there's 3 of them, got together, put $50 together and bought a panel and went to the Shannon Markets, which is a local craft market that is still around today and still a craft market. But we're talking 50 years ago, kind of the ideas of the Aquarius Festival that kind of formed Nimbin, which is notorious now for Mardi Gras and other things. But that cutting edge of technology and innovation and kind of came from the counterculture that we talk about now. So if we think about where Silicon Valley was at that time, I feel like the Northern Rivers was kind of sitting in that same space. So out of that, they went, well, what's going on around the world? There's oil shortages. There's this new technology that can essentially produce power for ever and ever. I mean, we were saying before we got on that in your background there, Nigel, you've got a 20-plus-year-old panel on your roof?
35 years old.
Yeah, there you go. So it's nearly as old as Rainbow Power. And it's still at 78%. So they're looking at these things and looking at the change and the wild ideas. And so, they bought a panel, sold it for enough to buy 2 more panels, and off they went. And back then, we're talking no overseas manufacturing. Lots of stuff doesn't exist. So we're making hydro systems. What were we manufacturing when you were there, Nige? Because that was a minute ago now.
Solar regulators, rechargeable torches. Before you could buy a rechargeable torch, Rainbow made a rechargeable dolphin torch. We had DC to DC converters to run DC microgrids. We had a bit of wind turbine stuff. We made our own sine wave inverters. So you couldn't get a good sine wave inverter. So we made one. Well, you made one.
Yeah, so like this is how far back we're going, and we're thinking about the edge of technology and how do we get people off grid. And it was always off grid. So we come from a village in the hills that if you wanted to move there, there was no prospect of having on grid power, and unless you were a massive farm or something to that effect. So for us, off grid and now hybrid to some extent is kind of in the DNA, and it's just the obvious direction that they went. So I mean, they went from that to Richard Corkish did a big piece of his PhD there when he was there. We had the first online solar store in Australia selling wholesale. It kind of goes on and on and on. And it's this remarkable movement and ideation from the original, let's get a panel and you've got to stand in front of the panel at the market so people understand that it's powering the fan, and when the sun's gone, there's no power. And getting from that idea that was completely out there to now, 30% rooftop penetration in the country. It's the big conversation is about energy transition. So you think about Peter and his wild ideas back then and how that is now what we're talking about is every day. And for me, stepping into Rainbow from where I've come from, it's an obvious progression of kind of an idea that's time has finally come. And the off-grid piece for that is so eloquently timed for right now globally and for where we are. And I think one of the conversations we were having, Nige, was about we used to power a village, which was Nimbin and the surrounds, and then into Mullum and Byron. And now a lot of the big projects we're doing are powering villages in the Pacific Islands and in PNG and things like that. So it's kind of just with newer technologies and finding those new solutions.
And just if I can take a quick tangent there, around that same time, from the 1970s, Professor Martin Green had his team at the Uni of New South Wales. And interesting to see in the news, he's just been given an award, him and 3 of his former colleagues, from King Charles of England, It's a 2023 Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering, and it cited the invention of the perk cell, the passivated emitter rear cell, which he designed in the 1980s.
Yep.
Mind blowing.
In Australia.
In Australia, yeah. New South Wales.
Amazing.
I mean, that's kind of it's such a great example, Luke, because that's kind of synonymous with taking these ideas decades and decades ago and now mainstream. What were they saying this week that, the solar this week set a whole bunch of new records? It's the equivalent of 7 Liddell power stations, I think it was. Just mind-blowing change from fringe and counterculture with my old buddies back in the day right through to being mainstream and running the country at times. And so where's Rainbow up to now, Zach? Has the focus changed dramatically, or are you just doing a modern version of what you were doing then? Where's the company?
Yeah. So to us, it's kind of it's the obvious progression. So as we were talking about, manufacturing componentry, because it didn't exist, to now, obviously, we've got a really nice mass market with really good testing. And so for now, it's kind of we're another version of that technology solution. So we're sourcing the best kind of technology and power management systems around the world and then turning them into solutions for our clients. Whether it's, we've still got the odd person in the hills that's on a 12-volt system that, there's not a whole lot of knowledge around that in the country to still fix those. But because we've got engineers that have been with us since, for 20 plus years, they were like, oh yeah, that's that system, and we'll fix it like this kind of stuff. We had a really good one actually a couple of weeks ago. A woman came in that only lives 2 k's from where we are, and she's got one of our hydro systems that we built 20 years ago.
No way.
And literally it's still running. She just needed new batteries from 20 years ago. Yeah, so the technology thing for us now is we're making containers that are kind of 100 plus kilowatt systems to power, anything from a village to a resort or, whatever it may be. Stuff like that is kind of the big pieces that we're doing, but then we've still got the nuts and bolts stuff and the bread and butter, which is mainly off grid. Bit more hybrid now as it goes, as you were saying earlier, Karl. There's a run on batteries at the moment. We're chasing our tails a lot to get to getting enough access to batteries.
Well, another one in the news this week was I think it was NRMA rolling out chargers across regional areas. There was $90 million in it, and I think the first one got installed somewhere between Darwin and Adelaide. It happened to coincide with the electric vehicle race, and people were able to charge there. But
so that's fully off-grid EV charging stations.
Fully off-grid EV charging stations. I see that there's going to be, my vision for that is a container that's got 8 second-hand Tesla car batteries in it and a handful of Cellectronics things or whatever that looks like to feed a 100 kilowatt tritium charger. That's mostly Australian-made stuff and some recycled stuff. But hey, if there's $90 million, let's do it.
Watch this space. That's all I can say on that comment.
Well, Zach, the other thing that sort of crosses to mind, you said that you were born in 1986. How did you find yourself as CEO of such a big organisation in such a short space of time? I mean, that's impressive, mate. I'm hats off to you. Good job.
I sacrificed my 20s is the answer to that. So I laugh at myself a bit. I'm a really typical kind of CEO persona. Go, go, go. I run ultra marathons. I do stuff in all my spare time. Everything's planned it's just really cliche. It's kind of funny. But so I started running my own businesses when I was 14. I ran a decent sized commercial and residential moving and storage business in Brisbane for about 10 years. And in amongst that, did a whole lot of other projects overseas, which were through a charity I was running, which amusingly, one of the coolest things we did was build a university in Zambia that was solar powered and off grid before I knew anything about the space. But we got computers from one of the universities after they were out of warranty, which is only 18 months, and built the only uni with a IT program in that country. And
what was the motivation? How did you end up there?
I don't know. I feel driven to use my skills and abilities to change the planet as much as we can in a very short period of time. We've got to do that before we're in a bit more hot water, literally. So that's kind of been the focus of my career. And to me, it's not about solar. It's not about, I've run a couple of direct-to-consumer businesses making stuff out of China, selling to America. I've run service businesses. It's not so much about the vehicle that we're using to get there. It's about the impact we can have on the planet. And even though we know that the majority of solar is put on roofs because it's a back pocket decision, the fact that we can do that effectively and well, I mean, if we go back to the electronics thing, recycling is such a huge future opportunity, but the life cycle of that and what we can really do in our industry right now, energy is our biggest emitter of pollution, bar none in Australia, hands down. And the second to that is vehicles. So obviously EVs, boom, you hit the two biggest things on the head. For me, it was kind of a no-brainer. So I've been running organizations for nearly 20 years, and this is actually smaller than the last one I ran. So it's kind of it's interesting though. Like everything has its own nuance because Rainbow was run as a collective till about 8 years ago, where everyone was same role or same kind of authority in the business, same wage, like really remarkable business, and that's only just changed recently. It harks to all the B Corp stuff people are talking about now and whatever, but we've just been doing it. It's just what we do. Like our building's completely off grid, and it's not because we had this idea that, wow, that'd be novel. It's because that's the way we live. Like everyone in that area lives off grid. So it's like when we're talking about building off grid power systems, it's like, well, of course we do, because that's how we live. So yeah, for me, it was kind of it was a logical progression. I was living in the hills there, really close to Rainbow. I've been running another kind of environmentally focused business in Byron, and it was just, if you're going to get me out of bed to do something that's exciting, this is it. Like 37-year-old business that's time has come, that can have a massive impact on the planet. Let's go. What can we do?
That's a story I've heard. A similar story to how so many people end up there, right? They're just driven to be there and they've got a purpose. So I mean, over the years, Zach, now that you've settled into your role, you've had your shoes under the desk for a while, Birkenstocks perhaps. What do you think is the secret to RPC having lasted this long? Because putting aside the type of businesses it's just a business. And I know, in my short time there, we went through our normal ups and downs like any business. And when I visited recently, I was laughing quietly, hearing about some of the ongoing challenges. How have they managed to last almost 40 years?
Multiple things. So the best teams in the world are joined together through shared values, right? So Rainbow Power has some legitimate geniuses working there who, when you get people that are really high level intelligent, they're going to have big ideas and fierce personalities often, so they clash. But it comes with those personalities and with how the business has been going. I mean, there's multiple people that have been there more than a decade, probably actually half the staff if I think about it. But when you can have shared values to come back to and a shared worldview of we can change something, that negates a whole lot of the issues you can have with people, I think. Obviously, being lucky on the solar coaster and picking up on enough of the ups and not being hit too hard by a lot of the downs has been a big one. Look, they're two really big ones. We're lucky that the street that Rainbow Power's head office and our factory on is called, our address is One Alternative Way, like an alternative way, which is hilarious. But we were the first building there. So we've owned our building for a really long time. That can really cut your overhead in pieces and give you a whole lot more resilience. But yeah, the fundamental thing of just being able to change and ideate the business, because we're not thinking, oh, we only make microinverters or we only install this. It's been, what is the solution for the future with the best technology we can get access to? And that was the beginning of the company. And then that's just, as you can see, the different generations come through. That's been it. It's been, how do we get there? Not we are this, but how do we solve this problem for the customer? And that's how do we get access to free energy? How do we get access to best technology? And that's been the underlying thing. So the premise of that, coupled with shared values, I think is the fundamental.
I love it. Maybe the hippies were right, Zach.
Yeah, well,
all these years they're still there, and so what about the future? You guys are going to be turning 50 soon, for goodness sake. Cast your vision forward. Is there some place in the world where Rainbow's going to be specially renowned for and specially good at by the time you turn 50? What's the world going to look like for you?
Yeah, look, it's the off-grid piece to me. And I think as we talk about off-grid being this wild idea and now it's come back to kind of the forefront, Tesla in a big way has made the mass market aware of, we can have batteries that actually work on our houses. But that idea now coming to fruition has meant that, that's been our universe for 36, 37 years now. So I think as we see the grid change and adapt and turn into more microgrids and, less poles and wires, and dare I say it, when we see climate change affect the infrastructure really significantly, which it's obviously going to do, whether we like it or not, then we're going to see that push towards microgrid. And I think that's probably our best case universe, really realistically. And that's not just for us, that's for the whole industry, but we just happen to have the advantage of, having a couple of decades of experience in that already.
Yeah, indeed. What better thing to do with a town that's been wiped out by fire than to use the freshly cleared land to put solar panels into fire, to run the new town.
Yeah, and look, it's interesting that we had the massive flood. We had the fires in 2019, as all of New South Wales did, but then we had the floods in Lismore that just wiped everything out as well. And there was so many stories of our customers having systems that are still running, and they're the only power on the street. So they're running everyone's fridges, they're running everyone's CPAP machines and stuff, and that kind of crystallizes, unfortunately, where the future's going, A, from a grid perspective, and B, from a climate perspective, I think.
That's right. And with climate change, it's going to get worse. I note last week in Gippsland, there was one day that there were bushfires going through, and at this time of the year to have the bushfire season starting is concerning. The following day in the same place, there were flood warnings and there were towns that were flooded out. We've got a long way to go in this. The climate's still changing. We're not.
The fire truck driving through the floodwater.
Yeah. We're not actually moving backwards in terms of carbon emissions yet.
And that's a really big point, isn't it? We aren't moving backwards. We have the option to, but we haven't got there yet. And that comes back to that back pocket thing, I think, really, realistically, we're the 30% of the lucky part of the world with 1% of the wealth. We've got the choice, and being realistic about the amount of behavior change we can expect out of people in the short period of time that we've got, power is a great one, right? People get it. It's easy to understand. The technology has been advanced so much now that it's accessible and it can have a really huge impact. So,
music to my ears, Zach. I mean, this is exactly why I'm banging on about heat pumps all day, all night, because it's just a massive no-brainer in terms of the reduction in the energy use. I see it taking care of 10% of the 43% emissions reductions that we want by 2030, just in doing hot water systems. It's a no-brainer. Rooftop
and it's
solar,
got that same driver.
no-brainer.
It's got the back pocket. It's got the savings. And Saul Griffith did a really good job of demonstrating how electrification can save consumers on money, but also the poorest people and the lowest socioeconomic groups. If there are programs in place for social housing to electrify, reduce energy costs, then it's actually a benefit that way. I note the Clean Energy Council did supply their Power Playbook, Accelerating Australia's Clean Energy Transition, to the federal government this week. So it's 45 points, and they all make sense. They're all achievable, and it pretty much goes through electrification, funding, policy, plans, decarbonisation, and education, which is all stuff we've covered in this podcast. But then the other one they've been talking about is an expansion to the SRES, so the small-scale solar scheme, to include batteries. And it seems that that's something that should happen sooner rather than later.
Oh, yeah, 2 years ago, absolutely.
Let's keep our fingers crossed there might be an announcement at All Energy if we're lucky.
Is there something that we don't, Nige?
No, I don't want. No, I just think it's a no-brainer, right? And it's inevitable. It's absolutely inevitable. And storage is just being talked about every day. New records in solar and the duck curve and everything else. Storage has to come in spades. And we're all, like Karl said earlier, we can all smell it now. We can see it starting to ramp up. So I think it's only a matter of time. And fingers crossed, the government might announce something, or some state governments or something. We'll see what happens.
Yep.
But I mean, getting back to Rainbow, I wanted to. There was one other point that came up in conversation about the legacy, and I'm an example of the legacy of Rainbow Power Company, because I started there and I learned everything that I didn't know up there before I got to move on and learn new things and other things from other people. But the legacy that Pete left behind is there in Rainbow. But he was also very much into the reuse and the recycling and stuff. And when I was chatting with a couple of the team up there, they mentioned that there's talk of potentially doing something with his legacy and with his name in a legacy around that reuse and recycling piece. Tell us what you've got in mind there, Zach.
Yeah, thank you. So look, to go back to the education piece, that is such a fundamental. We used to run a program called Living with Solar that Pete ran, and Pete actually was one of the first educators of what off-grid power was in Australia. So we had a course before the first off-grid power accreditation in the country run by Pete. So that's amazing that was kind of the education piece we're at now. And now obviously we've moved forwards. But yeah, the recycling thing. So Peter Pedals was known as Pedals because he cycled everywhere. He powered things through pedal power. But the bigger thought there is that he was always recycling things. So he was always finding repurpose for things. And we've been looking at the circular economy and how that is going to eventually have to be part of our industry. And we've joined an organization called CPVA, the Circular PV Alliance, it's an organization which harks back to the hippiness again, right? It's about how we can actually work together as individual companies to bring the circularity of our industry actually to the forefront and be successful in that, because it is a huge thing, that the rare metals, the energy to produce things versus the energy it can save, and the life, the payback periods and all of those things that we were just kind of alluding to. So for us, that's a really obvious solution for Peter. So we're looking for a couple of projects that we can do that will kind of, with the CPVA, to bring about some genuine kind of recycling. I mean, we all know this in the industry. We pull panels off the roof and go, what do we do with them? They're still, they're 20 years old with 78% efficiency left in them, but everyone wants the new 440s or the new, whatever number we're at in 12 months from now. But there's actually nothing wrong with the old tech. And, you can couple that in with the social housing or, low income or whatever. It's technology that's there that isn't being used. That really needs a solution for. So CPVA are working with UQ and a couple of other places to really make some big gains there and look at what we can actually do. And there's legislation in there too. There's how do you actually make it cost effective to use recycled panels, because the labor cost is everything to get it on the roof anyway. And then how do you actually get it to be safe and accredited to be actually usable and not burn your house down.
We've talked about recycling a lot on this show and had a couple of guests on, Zach, and so this is music to our ears. We're all right behind the idea of, not seeing that waste just pile up as waste and taking advantage of it and recycling and reusing as much as we can. So I'll tell you right now, if you get a program up with those teams and if there's a legacy program with Pete's memory in mind, put me down for a contribution.
Yeah, I agree 100% in terms of the cost of putting it on the roof, Zach. So I've got a bore pumping scenario on the family farm. No reason why secondhand panels wouldn't be perfect. But here we are. No one will do the job because warranty liability, if something goes wrong, they've got no fallback position. So all of a sudden, that's, even though it'll be a perfect application for 100 secondhand solar panels, no one will ever do it.
Yeah, so I think that's the first thing we got to change, right? Like, rather than talking about crushing everything down using the rare metals again, let's look at the reality of the situation, which is the power that's gone into actually creating these things and the efficiency left in them. Let's try and be smart. We've got a limited time. We've got a motivated society. Let's find some solutions together. And together, it's not like there's going to be a shortage of work for anyone in the industry. Like I think you were saying a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about 30% penetration, and by in the next 7 years, we've got to get that to 10x what it or 3x what it is now. There's no shortage of work. No one's going to be stepping on anyone else's toes. So let's think more like they do in lots and lots of other countries. America's a great example. You might be competing on someone in one quote, and the next quote, it's a big job, and you're using each other as suppliers. Like we really need to change that thinking in Australia and go, okay, so these are the things that we can do. What can you do? Let's do it together, because we're in a situation where A, we can all make more money when we work together, and B, anyone that's here with a kind of green bone in their body, to be cliche, is we can make a much bigger impact together. Like, more smart people is great.
Zach, after almost 40 years, I want to thank you for sharing the story there of what's an amazing achievement. For those of you who ever get up to the Northern Rivers, drop in and say good day, have a look at what a business can do for 40 years and take a few lessons from some of the solar pioneers in the industry.
I just wanted to touch on that recycling as well. So there is a pilot program currently in Queensland, which the Queensland government's involved, the Smart Energy Council, and there's a lot of really, really smart people there. And it seems the consensus is that the first step, because of the scale of panels that will come to end of life, the first step would be recycling. And in tandem with that, for secondhand reuse, the testing and repurposing would be treated as a different stream. But the priority is on the recycling, because there was a Senate committee that addressed this a couple of years ago. And, paraphrasing it, they said the industry needs to work it out, or it's going to be legislated stewardship programs and that sort of thing. So it's good to see things like the Smart Energy Council and the Queensland government working on it. You guys are working on it too. And we've spoken to Lotus Energy, Anthony, PV Industries in New South Wales, and there's a few other ones I've been speaking with. And the answer isn't just one group that's going to get it done. I think it's all hands on deck. So coming back to the opportunities in the industry, the recycling and repurposing is going to be an actual standalone industry of itself. There's huge opportunities. Number one, to have a circular economy, first and foremost. And secondly, people can make some money and build some businesses and industries around it.
Absolutely. Well, you and I, Luke, we've supplied hundreds, perhaps thousands of solar panels to Commodore Australia, which have ended up on pumping stations. They've come off people's roofs, 250s getting replaced with 350s or whatever, and we've gone to a lot of trouble to pack them appropriately so that they can survive transit, and making sure that we've got good quality secondhand panels, and those guys push them out to pumping stations. Great.
Beautiful. It's all doable.
The hippies were right.
Now, is there any questions or anything that we haven't asked you or covered off that you're passionate about or you'd like us to talk about?
We could talk forever about long distance running, but you'll lose all your subscribers if I do that.
Well, what got you into it?
In this watch this space, Zach. So watch this space. You have to give us a bit of a tidbit, surely.
I like doing crazy things. So we think about Pat Farmer running around Australia he did an average of 83 Ks a day, I think, for the yes vote in the last. Yeah, he just finished, right? I mean, at his age, he'd be, 60s,
61.
pushing 60s now. Yeah, there you go. And so for me, looking at that, and I mean, I actually got into running ultras through a friend who runs a pretty significant manufacturing business. And he said the highs and lows in long distance running, really long, we're talking 50 to 160K runs, the most similar to running a business you can get, because you're on your own. You got to do your own planning before you set out. Even if you're in a race and there's aid stations, you've got to know how to run it, and you get massive highs and massive lows. And that's the business. I mean, that's solar when we talk about, subsidies and STC changes and all of those things, but it's any business is you've got everything's great, everything's crap, everything's great. We're on fire. Oh, we're literally on fire, depending on the day to day, sometimes month to month. And it's a nice one like that for me in terms of really looking at, if we talk about building resilience and emotional resilience, to how we have to cope with the craziness of running these organizations that we find ourselves in, that from ideology to cash flow and all the rest of it.
It was great that you mentioned that you had some geniuses and that the talent clashes from time to time, but you've got the core values that keeps knitting it together. It's interesting in our business that one of the owners, Dom, he said to me, I asked him about a particular employee, and he said, "What do you think this business would look like if everyone was like you, Karl?" And of course, the penny drops. Well, obviously that's going to be somewhat problematic. And he says, I need a wide variety of personalities in the business, and I need a wide variety of different skills in order for us to be cohesive and good together. And it takes a long time for you to realise that sort of stuff. And I'm impressed that you've got it all worked out at 37. You know, it's just an amazing achievement to be the CEO of anything so young. And of course, you've got all of these amazing things. I get excited on the podcast, not generally for what we talk about. That's just what we talk about. It's part of the industry. But it always blows me away the amazing people that we have as guests on our show. And that's why I do it, to meet these incredible people. And you're an incredible person, Zach. Thanks for inspiring me today.
You're overstating it, but I'll let you have the propaganda.
And where would you find another Karl Jensen, let alone a whole company of them?
Right. Nigel's all right too. He did some cool stuff when he was up here.
And I can't remember how we tied it in before we went on air. We were talking about your ultra marathons and long distance running, and we we're drawing some comparison to trade shows and how people approach networking and turning up in a good shape the next day.
the Cliff Young story. So Cliff Young ran from Sydney to Melbourne, broke all the records. He was in his 50s. He was a farmer, not a runner. And he broke the records because rather than doing what they used to do back then and just sprinting and then sleeping, he just kept going. He went slower and just kept going. He just went through the night, didn't sleep, and everyone laughed at him for the first couple of days, and then they realised that they were 12 hours behind him and had no chance of catching him. So if we apply that to trade shows, pacing ourselves means that we win, right?
I thought you were going to say the don't sleep part. Sorry, mate. Yes, pacing yourself. Good advice.
Yeah. I mean, there's two options, right? When do you want to fall over?
Pacing yourself sounds like a good plan. I reckon there's so much on this year. I was going through the agenda today actually and go, how can I get to all of these presentations and functions? And there's some really good looking speeches, interesting people there's a lot on. So the Cliffy Shuffle, that's how we get
the Cliffy Shuffle.
Even more for the pre-show, so the day before All Energy, there's a ton of events, and Selectronics have got a factory tour. Power Plus have got a factory tour. There's a Wise that's on.
Tindo, I've got a function on that I'm going
solar
to.
Cutters.
They're having a big thing.
Solar cutters. Yeah. So let's hope that everyone booked their airfares to arrive a day early, because there's another show outside the show.
Well, the Fronius Gala dinner's on the Monday, and I know that some of the other groups have Monday events too. So the awards night. So one point there as well, I think 2 days is very tough to fit that much content. The quality of speakers and exhibitors and everything is off the charts. So if you haven't booked your ticket, you certainly should. And for installers, you can actually get all of your CPD points for the year at this event. For those who can't make it, the Smart Energy Council has a roadshow coming up from the 8th of November, and it's going to go to Adelaide, Melbourne, Hobart and Sydney. And that's also got, I think, 60 CPD points attached to it. So if you want to come and cram and you can make all energy and you're happy to sacrifice that time and you're going to miss out on a little bit, come and get your points. Otherwise, the SEC Roadshow, Installer Roadshow is coming up too. And Karl and I are going to be there. All right, so that's about all we've got time for today. Just a quick whip around for any last comments or questions. Karl.
Yep. Luke had a great electrification event for the Burundara Shire Council last Sunday. They had 700 registrations and more than 2,000 people through the door.
Wow.
So that was a fantastic turnout, and it's just indicative of what our communities are capable of, should you give them the opportunity. So lots of people wanting to move to an all-electric future, and it's great that we've got that kind of attendance.
That's unreal, man. And we expect to see lots more of those shows around communities, and whether they're run by community groups or by businesses, it's all great. Nigel, what are your last thoughts?
Yeah, two quick ones. I noticed with great interest that it looks as if SAPN may have triggered a test of dynamic export control last week. There was a few people jumping up and down on the socials noticing that their customers were contacting them saying, weird things are happening to my solar and battery system. What's going on? And yada, 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 yada. And it would appear, according to the rumours, I haven't seen it explicit yet, but it would appear that they've been doing some testing of new connections and new inverters that are coming on stream, which is awesome news because, the duck curve just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need smart control, we need more storage and all those kinds of things. The second part that I'll mention, which is kind of related to that, is the challenge. One of the big challenges around this space, and that's connectivity. Big shout out and a big apology to all our customers who've been affected. We've been affected by a network outage. It happens from time to time. Over my 6 years, there's been, probably a good half dozen or more that I can think of off the top of my head, where we've seen the network drop out for some reason. It might be a carrier, it might be Telstra or Optus or Vodafone, or it might be one of the SIM card providers that sit in between Telstra and us, for example, or it might be the connectivity between those parties and us and Watwatchers, for example. So there's a whole number of really, really complex things going on in the cellular industry at the moment. The side effect of that is that we've had 3G being closed down. We've had a lot of refarming of networks, and now we've got some network disruptions out there. So for all those affected customers, we're really, really sorry. We're doing everything we can. It's not in our control, unfortunately, so we can't tell the network to switch it back on. That's up to them, but we can certainly harass them, but makes for a pretty poor user experience. And so this whole issue of connectivity and everything else is crucial to get right. So we're working hard on it.
Zach Rook from Rainbow Power Company, thanks again for coming on today. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave with us?
Oh, look, I'm just excited to kind of have these conversations, and I'm really grateful that you guys had me on. Said some nice things about me that may or may not be true. But look, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone at All Energy, and let's keep up the good work.
Right then.
Awesome, Zach. Before you go, tell our listeners where you are.
I'm sitting at the bottom of the Border Ranges National Park with a couple of koalas in a tree behind me. It's a hard Friday afternoon.
So we normally talk about mental health and what you do to relax and what you do to stay on top of all of the mental pressures that happen. That's obviously one of these things that you do. Tell us a bit about it.
I have to spend a certain amount of time running around to keep myself in check. And it's a beautiful thing to talk about because it is a mental health thing for me. I usually run really fast growth businesses. Like the last one I did got to $1 million a month in like 5 months. Like just really, there's a lot going on. And that's kind of how my brain works too. There's always a lot going on. So for me, running long and not always super fast gives me time to churn stuff out, gives me really good pheromones, balances everything out, and gives me the opportunity to kind of reflect on the bigger things that are going on in the world and get some perspective and spend some time in the nature that we kind of talk about loving and actually forces me in there. So that's my big thing. And I run between 50 and 80 Ks a week, and I have done for most of the last decade.
So we're doing that over a couple of days. Are we running 10 Ks a day? What does that look like?
A short run for me is an hour, which is about 12 to 14 Ks. A long run is 3 to 4 hours, which is anywhere from 30 to 50 Ks. Depends on the terrain.
That's definitely getting into some pain territory, yeah.
Yeah, the pain cave, it's real. Yeah. But look, when I'm not racing, you take it a bit easier, and it gives you some opportunity to kind of stop and smell the proverbial roses. Change of season up here has been pretty special in the last couple of weeks. Like all the spells are different, or the birds are different. When you spend enough time in it, you can notice that. And that's been a really special couple of weeks I've had.
So you said that you go through some emotions the same as business. While you're running on your own, do you laugh? Do you cry? Do you go through all of those emotions? What does it look like?
Yeah, so the kind of stuff I do is a lot of trails and a lot of hills. And so there's always the reward. I usually start at the bottom of a hill. So you do the hard bit first. And I have a habit of being quite noisy when I come down and doing a couple of yells, a couple of tahoos when I start to go really quick downhill. So yeah, there's definitely that. One of the tricks for me is you run somewhere you've got to run back from, so there's no one to rescue you. And that way you go further. You can't stop, right? Walking back takes quite a long time.
Indeed. Well, as I said, it's my inspiration that we get amazing people on the podcast, and I'm always blown away by the people that want to come onto the podcast. And a sincere thank you, Zach, and I look forward to meeting you.
Thanks, Karl. Appreciate it.
Very good. Thanks again, Zach. Thanks, Karl and Nigel, as always, and look forward to catching up in person in Melbourne for All Energy. So thanks for listening. Just remember, second day of All Energy at 2:30. You can come and see us on the Solar Masterclass stage. Grab a beer, come and join the conversation. We're going to have Robbie Nichols from the CEC as well to come and help us give a wrap of the show. Hope to see you there. Thanks a lot.